All right. With my colleague here to clean off the camera. There we go. Nice and shiny. Welcome everybody back.
Always looks so good. Mine looks a little blurry always.
Welcome everybody back to Brown and Browner. We're doing the post first weekend of the NCAAs along with a few other topics today, and it should be a little fun. We'll see where we like to take our Sweet 16 picks and have some fun with the rest of the season. I will kick it off with a quick apology and condolences to Miss Juju from last night, unfortunately.
Ooh.
Yep. Torn ACL, unfortunate, in a game that, was already over by the time of the tip, unfortunately. Not the best thing for the NCAAs, not the best thing for USC Definitely basketball not. And her.
Right.
I say this in the nicest way possible. Was she jinxed by Miss Daniels?
That is funny because if you didn't say it, I was going to say it because if you didn't see it, folks, Juju was talking to
JD5.
Gosh, why am I spacing on his name? Jaden Daniels, right? And they were having a great conversation, laughing and such. And then the next shot you see is Mrs. Daniels sitting in between the two, basically pointing out that she saw them on the Jumbotron, and that wasn't going to happen, and you're not talking to my son.
The ultimate cock block, if you will, for poor kid.
That term never usually used for moms.
No, absolutely.
That was cold, and then literally a day later, she gets hurt.
Yep. Again, we're not trying to insinuate voodoo.
But Mrs. Daniels, you shouldn't have done that.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the funny thing. As soon as that popped up and as soon as it hit social media and everything else, everybody in the world was so supportive of, JD5 and Juju. Like, how great would that be? It's like a superpower couple in sports. Yeah.
What did you say? The new Jay-Z Beyonce?
The new Jay-Z Beyonce, I think, was a comment somewhere in there. And I'm like, hey, that, you know what? You got two high-class superstars here talking it up, chilling, best of their craft. I mean,
and again, it's a conversation. And I tell you what, and we've talked about this. If I'm a protective parent, I want my kid to stay on track, be focused on the goal. He sort of got there already, right? Like,
he's a grown man.
He's playing for his 3 years so he can get his long-term contract.
Right.
But he just went to the NFC Championship game last year. He's on break. This is his break time.
Yeah.
And what? He can't talk to anybody? If I want my kid talking to somebody at his level. Juju's at his level.
Exactly.
I don't want some hood rat or some chicken head or some gold digger who's across the street going, ooh, I've been looking at Jaden for a while and he's about to be a trillionaire. Let me see if I can get some of my hands in his pocket.
Yep. Yeah. See, this ain't no road trip fling or something on the week, during a season. This is high class network connection, everything else that you want in life. And I'm sorry, but sorry, Miss Daniels, you done wrong.
Yeah. Sorry, Miss Daniels.
Yeah. And that's the funny thing. I think if I'm reading the story right, Juju had just gotten done with her first round game. Great. She was walking back through the tunnel. She was leaving apparently from the site. And all of a sudden she sees Jaden Daniels walking in. It's like, hey, wait a minute.
Hey, he's sort of cute.
Yeah.
Until Mama came in. Mama was getting some popcorn, looked up at the TV and saw the Jumbotron and then talking to you. She's like, oh, shit.
Mama Bear said, forward for you, little one.
Yeah. And what you said about voodoo, it's sort of like that's what she was doing on the side. Like, all right, you think you're going to mess with my Jaden?
Yeah. She had a little doll with her with some needles.
and honestly, they're both cute. The way they interacted, that was cute. They're both good-looking people. Yes. Mom, just let him live his life. He's gonna be your son forever, but he's not gonna be your little boy forever.
Yeah, he's a grown man. I mean, whether he's 21 or not, he's a grown man at this point.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, he's a grown man with a grown plan. What would you be doing without your son flipping a bill for you, Mama?
Exactly. But no, apologies to Juju Watkins. Apologies to the NCAA because you might have lost one of the faces of the tournament, unfortunately, for the women's game too. Granted, you got the Pacemakers, you got US, you got UCLA, you got obviously South Carolina, you got all the powerhouses, but for the NCAA women, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit, they need that little star power clout to get the attention. Just like last year, you had Caitlin Clark, obviously, and it helped. Helped a lot. You know?
It helped a whole lot. It brought women's basketball up into like the consciousness of society and television audiences. So, and I think I personally thought that Juju, because even last year with all of the Caitlin Clark, and gosh, I like the Chicago Sky. I can't think of her name right now. And sucks getting old, y'all.
I like to affectionately call her Bayou Barbie, but Angel Reese, yes.
Angel Reese. And both of them had a lot of hype, and they had that rivalry. But you heard about Juju. Juju was making a name for herself then. Yes. And with those two leaving, which were the two biggest names in college, women's basketball at the time, that was a great way to pass that over to Juju. Yeah. And I thought Juju really was if you ask anybody around, she's the most known or the best known women's basketball player in college. So I really hate to see her go down, and I hope that her recovery is speedy and that she is able to get back to the athletic ability that she had prior to the injury.
And I'll touch on an interesting topic. So when you've got the star power cachet in women's basketball coming out of college, you want it to obviously succeed, grow, develop everything else. We've seen a couple instances now. Last year, Paige Beckers. This year, Juju Watkins have to take on that.
Another big time name. Yep.
Injury to take away that momentum from them being the next face of whatever it is, college basketball, the pros, whatever it is. And it sucks. I mean, it sucks in the fullest degree, not just as a player, but even for the women's game as a whole. And it's almost like it's taken away some of the stronger momentum from even more star power. Because I mean, think about it. Last year, if you would have had Paige Beckers on top of, Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark. I mean, you're thinking about a three-way piranha of star players plus South Carolina, the juggernaut that they are as a team, and their own star power with Cardozo last year. Like, that would have just been huge monumentally for the ratings. As if this year wasn't already walking into the NCAAs when you had a potential Juju versus Paige in the Elite Eight, which is ridiculous.
Right. I was looking at the bracket, and it was like, wow, all of these good players and good teams are going to play before they get to the Final Four.
Yep. So it sucks for the game. On a more transitory note, you'll see that the WNBA apparently has got a contract dispute going on right now. Their player representative happens to be Angel Reese this year. She's already come out very vocal about different things. There's been a lot of animosity towards it and some for it. I mean, obviously the women's game needs more support. We know that. We've seen that. At the same time, the criticism levied against the WNBA is even with all this star power from a business perspective, just isn't cutting it, apparently. It's still underwater, which is unfortunate. How do you solve that? I don't know if there really is a way. I mean, you got to grow the sport. You got to popularize the game. I'll transition that same conversation over to what happened with U.S. soccer the other day. I don't know if you saw a little bit of that. So
I did not.
U.S. soccer had a friendly with Canada, and we're about to host the World Cup here pretty soon. If you haven't looked at it,
but didn't U.S. soccer just lose to maybe not Panama, but they lost to somebody in one of those CONCACAF kind of things.
Yep, we've lost within the region. We've had to hire a new coach, Pochettino, which I thought would be a good hire potentially, but it hasn't worked out yet. But now you're entering Gold Cup this summer, which is going to be a big deal because North and South America and good competition, good games there. And then we're leading the World Cup. If you saw how few people attended that U.S.-Canada game over the weekend, it was fewer than the WNBA. Fewer than the worst game in the WNBA is what I would dare say. Think about that for a second.
Well, that is why, and I champion this every time I get an opportunity. Women's sports, while not across the entire sports landscape are equal to men, I'd rather watch women's tennis than men's tennis.
Yes, 100%.
I'd rather watch women's soccer, and they're way better than the men and have been basically since I can remember.
That's a complete dawn time, yep.
Those two sports in general, I'd rather watch. Heck, I'd watch women bowling to men's bowling. But the sad thing to say about that is while I champion those, and I'm glad that those people, whether it's Venus Williams or Pia, the women's soccer team, standing up for their right to be paid because they're generating more viewership and dollars than the men's sports were. So pay us equally.
Yep.
Basketball has never made it there.
Right.
They tried to do these lingerie football leagues and whatever, and they even had a women's football league as well. And I was watching a little bit of that. And while I might be just a football lover, that isn't going to get people to pay and buy and go see it in person and buy concessions, because that's where they make their money. And if they get people in, then they can drive revenue via the marketing and such and television contracts. That's just not going to happen. As much as Caitlin Clark even brought a light to women's basketball and made it exciting and people wanted to watch it, the sad thing about that, and I'm just going to say this frankly, is a lot of that, I feel, my personal opinion, not saying it's right or wrong, I feel like it was that Great White Hope thing where people were getting on that bandwagon. And if you noticed in the league this year, her being in Indiana's one of those states that there was a lot of commentary around racism and how they tried to, show Angel Reese and her sort of at like polar opposites and all of that stuff.
And I want to blame the media on that, because here you got two world-class talents in their craft in basketball and women's basketball. Two different positions, mind you, because Angel Reese plays up front court and Caitlin Clark plays in the backcourt and pops up those magical threes.
Yeah, two totally different games. Yep.
But I hated the fact that they brought up this race issue in the media and otherwise in marketing and everything else. And I feel like it did play a subtle bias in how everything got propagated, unfortunately. I mean, there's some things that I agree with Angel Reese. There's some things I don't, and that's just a personal philosophy in terms of how she speaks and carries herself. But at the same time, please don't make it about race at the end of the day. This is two women that are at the excellent peak of their craft, trying to do both of their games and everything else. And I hate the fact that it did turn into something where they were trying to polarize women's basketball, even within its own successes, for white and black. And I'm like, come on, man, like you're trying to go toward the same cause here.
And that's what tainted me.
Yep.
And I was watching it, and I was watching it in college, but I didn't want to watch it anymore if it was going to be like that. I didn't. And this is where I think they tried to use something to get more interest, and maybe it did, but it's going to be short-lived. They have to come up with a full business plan. And if it's involving the NBA and saying, hey, the NBA, it's sort of like when a drug company subsidizes the entire, if you look across all of the drugs, you're winning and losing. And maybe NBA, you're winning every day you show a game.
Yep. Maybe
you put a little bit more money and a little bit more marketing into the women's game to prop them up too, because I think as a whole, any basketball is good for all of basketball.
Right.
But I don't think they got that kind of support financially and otherwise.
Yeah, no, it's going to take, I mean, honestly, I don't even have an answer to it in terms of what it's going to take, but it's going to take a little bit more star power, unfortunately. It's going to take, one of the things I've noticed in the NBA this year, and maybe because I frankly don't like to even pay attention to any bit of the regular season in the NBA, because I feel like it's A, it's too long, B, people sit out, which is another whole topic we'll get into in a second. But
agreed.
I feel like every week or every few days, you get a marquee matchup. Like, hey, I'm going to go watch Golden State versus the Lakers. I'm going to go watch the Nuggets and the Timberwolves. Like, those marquee matchups with all the star power and all the playoff implications and everything. I feel like we're getting that every 2 to 3 days in the NBA. The WNBA, I mean, how often are Angel Reese's team and Caitlin Clark team playing against each other? How often are the other star power teams like Vegas or something playing against whoever? I don't think it's marketed appropriately and scheduled appropriately to keep our attention long enough. You know what I mean? And I feel like that. I mean, that's with a lot of sports. I mean, even women's tennis. I mean, I'm the biggest women's tennis fan. You're the biggest women's tennis fan.
Yeah.
We know the star power. We know the Williams sisters. We know everybody else that's come through and along the way, Coco and everyone else. You get marquee tournaments every so often, and you're paying attention for the entire 2 weeks. Like, that's just how it works. So I think there's a little bit of marketing lacking when it comes to the WNBA, for one.
And that's what I was saying. The NBA should help there.
Yeah, the NBA could really be helping there. Absolutely. Imagine, just an idea, imagine a crossover league. I mean, I get there's different fundamentals of basketball and everything else, but imagine a mixture of whatever city you're playing for. You have women and the men play together against other competing squads in the off season or something. Just an idea.
I tell you what, that's a great idea, and I think if they wanted to take that a little further, they could use what the Women's Basketball League did with their 3-on-3 competition, and be able to sprinkle in some male stars.
Yep.
And I think you might be able to hype that up a little bit and maybe get more of that, like you said, crossover interest to generate more viewership. The reality is this, though. It's sort of like how, if you think about it, it's sort of like how I feel American soccer suffers. American soccer suffers because there's basketball and baseball and football and hockey and other sports that the majority of the really good players are playing.
Yep.
Basketball, while people play basketball, whether you live in the suburbs or in the city, that's always been sort of a poor person's sport, right? It hasn't been. That's not where, like, if I got, for instance, I got some friends, they got, talented daughters who have some height. What did the talented daughters who have height play?
Exactly.
Volleyball, tennis. They're not playing basketball.
Yep.
So I think that they're not getting the elite. They're getting great players, Juju and otherwise. And I think they're going to have another wave of that star power with Paige and with Juju and a few other players that are currently on the college level. They need to be able to understand how to market it so they can get more of these young girls who are undecided on what they want to do to like the idea of playing basketball, to ask their parents to buy them that little rim so you can have it in your driveway and fart around with it. That's where you get the interest because, like you said, you grow it, just like American soccer. American soccer on the women's side, they've grown it in a way that they can keep filling those slots with new, really good players. Men's don't have that ability for some of the reasons I stated before and others. And I feel like if they really want to be able to build women's basketball, they got to get to those inner city and suburban areas and drive that interest so people want to play basketball. And if you want to play it, then you're willing to watch it. But if I'm not going to play it, I'm probably not going to watch it a whole lot.
Very true. Very, very true. And that's the funniest thing. Soccer and basketball, arguably, are the cheapest sports to play. Because all it takes is the ball.
Those are brown sports. Those are brown sports. Who dominates those sports? Brown people.
Yes. And that's the thing. And that's why globally, you're seeing the resurgence of those two sports. Now, male basketball more so than obviously women's, even on a global scale, obviously. But soccer and men's basketball, probably two of the most popular things globally that you could think of right now.
Globally, because basketball is global, whereas NFL is not. I mean, it has viewership that's global, but it doesn't have a footprint. And they tried in NFL Europe and other things. You're right about that.
You're getting started.
And soccer are the true global sports. But wait, baseball too.
Baseball is growing tremendously. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing is I think it's growing globally. I think it's actually shrinking in America in terms of interest, just because of the dynamics of MLB and how long it is and everything else. Again, personally, yet another sport that has an enormously long season, and I might have some local interest or some vested interest in one of my favorite teams, but beyond that, how many people are really going actively to baseball games like they used to, let's say in the 80s and the 90s, where I think it was more of a prevalence.
I agree with that. I mean, the length and everything else has to do with it. I'm sorry, the seventh inning stretch. This is some boring ass 1950 shit that baseball has in place. They haven't livened the game up enough to be able to keep the young people interested. Young people need things like this. They're trying to shorten like the pitcher and how long they take and the time in between innings and get on. Now they're trying to put in a electronic umpire or whatever, a digital umpire as opposed to the umpire. And that's great, probably a little late. But to bring this back full circle to what we're talking about initially with women's basketball, I feel like the women's game, they have two advantages. They did what like the USFL did with the NFL back in the day, and they play off season. So they don't compete with that. I mean, right now, like college basketball, you have to. They have to have that overlap. But you notice that the games are during the week. not the weekend, so they are able to do. So they're doing the right things there. But I feel like they really have to come up with something, regardless of the grassroots thing I was talking about, trying to stimulate more young people to want to play the sport, young women. They have to come up with a way that, I don't know, how do you attract viewership? And that's why I say the NBA has done a great job of marketing itself. I used to watch tape delay of the finals game when the Lakers were playing the Sixers. It was on tape delay at like 10:30 at night.
Yep.
They knew how to market themselves and got them to where they are now. Use those tools and that resource, lend it to the WNBA so they can understand how to best market themselves. And I think that will help them a ton. And they won't need to, it's you can generate stars too. And I think they also have to do a better job of that as they're moving through the college ranks, because you only hear about Paige Becker and Juju, but there are at least 15 other great players that you're not hearing about.
Well, and that's a good transition. So, transitioning back to our original topic of the NCAA tournament and all that, NIL. You've got all of this money flowing through college right now in every capacity and everything possible. Take advantage of it, WNBA. Take advantage of it, NCAA basketball. Take advantage of everybody. We're all for players getting paid. They need to figure out how to market better.
Right.
Broader scope, not just for the few. I think that's your bigger problem across all of the sports because, like I said, I've attended non-revenue college sports recently, and I can see some star power and some cachet being built out, but you're never going to see it in a non-revenue sport. You're never going to see it in something more subdued, more quiet, because our marketing powers that be or whatever aren't targeting those things. They're targeting single individuals here or there that they cherry pick, whatever it is, whatever that process is. They need to do it more broadly because honestly, there is a ton of talent out there that can be brought up and create that greater popularity. Absolutely.
Hey, and hire those people, put them in their schools. You got an AD, maybe you need a marketing director who is specific to the sports area. And I'm sure they probably have that, but put more money into it.
Get you a team manager like Amir Khan, for God's sakes. I mean,
honestly, that would be a great idea. This guy's got an NIL, right? And look at how much attention he brought to the school. And I just heard he's going to be moving to another school with the coach, maybe NC State or something like that. That's the kind of thing that they need to do.
Think about who thought about a team manager of all people. I mean, yes, they exist because they got to do all the scout work and everything behind the scenes, and they're respected within their own teams. This dude took it to the next level. It's like, what, I'm gonna turn this into a brand.
Because he's has personality. He's not just the gopher. He's the hype guy. He's all of these things, and again, I think they should try to do more of that to bring some attention to the sport.
And especially with it, like I said, especially with the amount of money flowing through college right now. I can't reiterate that enough. It is insane how much money is flowing through college right now at every level. And it can easily be shared.
Well, and here's the other thing that I think is being overlooked in some ways. Generally, football by itself sort of pays for all of the other college sports. Basketball brings in a lot of revenue too, at least on the men's side for sure.
Right.
They should start looking at women's basketball as being a way to sustain itself by the revenue that it brings in. It shouldn't be that they need basketball and football. They could use women's sports in the same manner because this is the way that women can now also be part of that equation. And I feel like they can generate enough money. If you saw the viewership when Caitlin Clark was playing last year, if you piggyback on that and make sure you bring out a star on every team, get the little girl who is growing up, who's 10 years old, to know the name of that local college's star player. And all of a sudden they might want to aspire to be like that. And the more you get people to look at it like that, the more likely you're going to get the viewership. And you might have this slumber party where all the girls are watching basketball instead of sitting up playing with Barbie dolls or whatever the girls do. I'm not saying don't get me on that one, guys. Like, oh my God, no, I'm not trying to stereotype you. I'm not misogynistic. I'm just saying, let's try to change the focus so that you can bring in that viewership. You can bring in that interest that way.
Think about what Nebraska did with women's volleyball this year. They said, you know what, we're going to open at the football stadium. We're going to 100,000 people to watch women's volleyball in the middle of Ohio, in the middle of Lincoln, Nebraska. How impressive was that?
Well, and that's a great point. When you get to areas like that, There are a lot of areas in Texas like that where you really lean on high school sports or the college sports because you don't have the professional teams. You don't have that other stuff. So that's what you do. And if you can get women's volleyball to be watched like that, not saying that women's volleyball isn't exciting and interesting and athletic, but if you can do that with women's volleyball, you should be able to do that with women's basketball.
Yeah. To me, every school should lean into where you have your strongest dynamic, men or women's program. Like that's where you create your local niche. That's where you create your recruiting environment, if you think about it. Whether it's women's tennis, volleyball, badminton, I don't care what sport it is or what activity. It could be, I mean, look at cheerleading in the SEC, for God's sakes, or look at dance or gymnastics in the SEC. That's a whole different brand, too. You ever seen the attendance of that? 40,000 people there to watch gymnasts at the college level.
A ton of people. Well, we both have the same friend whose daughters has done that, and that kind of competition, and there's viewership there.
Yes. So no, like I said, colleges need to learn and lean into that kind of thing, and definitely push it as much as possible. That said, the Sweet 16.
That's a nice transition.
Yep, the Sweet 16. Now, interesting matchups all around this weekend, obviously. A couple surprises here and there, and a couple not. Frankly, nothing's changed for me in terms of my Final Four expectations, I don't think, across the board from where I had them last week. But there are some really good matchups coming up this weekend, I think. So,
before you start the matchups, St. John's and Rick Pitino, shame on you for hyping yourselves up and making people believe and then throwing up such a dud. While I was sitting with my wife watching it, and we both said, wow, that's like watching the kids play out in the park. They're throwing up so many bricks. Couldn't make a layup.
Resurrecting New York City basketball, Patino. You came this close this season, and you couldn't take it over the next hurdle.
And I think all he had to do, I'm not sure if people really thought Syracuse was going to win, or I'm sorry, St. John's is going to win. I didn't. But, boy, talk about a shot in the arm for the city of New York. I mean, he's already done that with St. John's. But, boy, he could at least made it to the – maybe not the Final Four, but maybe the Elite Eight. I think that would have done a world of good for that area, for the colleges there, etc.
Absolutely. No, then it was a good team. Yes, they had beaten a lot of great teams throughout the season. Only were a 3-loss team walking into the tournament, but we saw what it was. At the end of the day, the Big East has gone down in what its stature used to be, obviously, and there wasn't enough star power there to carry the St. John squad, unfortunately.
I'm sorry. There wasn't enough. I'll just be down to it. This is Rick Pitino. Rick Pitino's had some great squads. He's won some things, but he's lost a lot more. And I personally feel like Arizona got away with it. But how do you leave your star player on the bench in the key moment of the game? And remember, you played all season to get here, to get that number 2 seed. And your best player, I don't care if he's shooting 1 for 80.
Right.
He should still be on the floor because any shooter will tell you, how do you get out of a slump? You keep shooting.
Yep.
If I'm that kid, you be talking about NIL, guess what I'm doing?
Yeah, you're gonna see. And well, it's funny you bring that portal, and we'll maybe touch on that one too. The transfer portal opened yesterday. Let me get your initial takes on why the hell you would open up a transfer portal in the middle of a tournament. And mind you, there are players on active rosters playing this weekend that have already signed in and saying, I'm transferring. How much of a farce or a crock of crap is this in college basketball? Because honestly, for me, it's taken away the purity of the game. I used to watch intently almost every single game during a college season for my own team. I don't do that anymore because, frankly, the luster's not there. The kid, at least for the
that's because your team sucks because Kansas sucks.
Well, yeah, that's one example. But at the end of the day, in a more broader context, players are no longer playing for the letters on their jersey or the coach they represent. They're there for that 1 year to get their money, to get their show, get their marketing, and then the next day they're out the door. College football is even more prevalent than basketball, believe it or not. And we've seen that obviously over the last couple seasons with the national champions that have developed over and over. Quarterbacks transfer every year. Wide receivers transfer every year. Running backs transfer every year. All the star powers are transferring every single year because nobody's sticking around for more than 2 years at any program these days. But to open up the portal in the middle of the tournament.
And honestly, that is a great point about the portal. And I didn't know that, but I tell you this. the reason why NFL coaches aren't allowed to interview when they're in the playoffs is because they should be focused on the now, trying to win.
Exactly.
So if you open up the portal and I'm distracted from winning because part of my mind is thinking where I'm going to be next year versus me focusing on where I am right now.
Think about it. We don't do that for pros. These are college kids that already have their, they're looking every single direction every single day at this point. They're not that focused.
Now you got what you're doing to the college kid is you got him. He's standing on the quad, right? Yeah. He's supposed to be going to class, which is him focusing on the basketball and making sure he puts his effort in and they do their best. But now you have him sitting on the quad and you're throwing a bunch of pretty girls by him, and all he's doing is this. And he hasn't taken a step towards trying to achieve that goal. He's looking at the candy that's in front of him, wondering how, thinking about that. That is wrong, college basketball. Who thought of that? I'm sure it's probably driven more by football than basketball based on the timing.
And I'll let my argument stand on its own, hopefully the next 2 to 3 years. I feel that because of NIL, you're going to see fewer players of quote-unquote greatness come out of college, regardless of sport, because the focus and the discipline that used to exist, let's say 10 years ago and even prior to that, obviously, is not going to exist because everybody's so focused on the money now. Doesn't matter for the talent, doesn't matter for the marketing. That's all they're looking at. They're looking at their next paycheck and their next payday from wherever it is. And there
capitalism.
It's capitalism at its finest and the most brutal. We say that NIL was good for college sports because it allowed players to finally get paid for what they were due.
I think it brought some level, like a level ground. They should get paid. Someone else should profit off by billions of dollars off your likeness and your work.
They should get paid, but now you're going to have the ultimate form of greed that corrupts it, I think, inherently over time. That's going to be my contention. Maybe it'll get fulfilled in the next 3 or 4 years to back up my contention, and I think it will. Because honestly, I don't think you're going to see the star power cachet that comes out that sustains itself like, the Tom Brady's, the Peyton Mannings of the world that lasted 10, 15 years, or even the basketball players before them that have lasted for 10, 15, 20 years in the NBA. You're not going to see that anymore because I think the focus of the player is going to be so much within themselves and not on the concept of the team sport that they're in.
Well, I don't disagree with that. And I'll even add that I think with younger people, first off, they aren't mature. And we've seen some of the gaffes that these even pro athletes have done. Hey, Ja Morant, remember that $200 million you could have made if you weren't being so, gun happy and trying to impress your friends instead of, thinking about the bigger picture. So I do think, you're going to see some of that. But I think the biggest thing you're going to see, and you said some of this, is the great players of the past didn't get paid much. They played because they had a passion for the sport. They loved the sport, and the sport loved them back. They ate, drank, and slept the sport.
Yep.
They didn't make a lot of money. They opened the doors for people to make money today, but they didn't make a lot of money. Right. The more money that people continue to make, especially early on, the less likely you're going to see that passion and love for it, because now it becomes a job. You're not looking at it as, this is, man, I wish I could do it right now, find a sport that I'm great at and I could do it because I love it and it's fun for me. Oh, and I get paid. That's how it used to be. Now it's, I'm good enough at the sport, I should get paid. And people look at the sport and dedicate themselves. Jordan, what made him so great and why many people love him, but some hate him, is that as good as he was, he went into the weight room to get better in shape so he could beat Detroit. He saw that his leaping ability went down, so he went into the gym and developed that turnaround fadeaway shot. Developed an outside shot. How much development are you going to see from a person who already got money in their pocket? Jordan was a different breed, but everybody else is sort of like, you get a little content when all of a sudden, hey, I made $1 million. I don't need to work for the rest of my life. I don't have to do all of these things. Especially today's culture, today's youth, different thing. Back then we got our asses whooped. Now we hand out, medals just because you went to school that day.
Yeah. Here's your participation. Well, believe me, I can't stand it.
I agree with you. I think that, while I think you and I have some similarities as far as the belief in NIL, because I don't think that someone should profit off your likeness and your abilities and you get nothing, because that college degree is nothing in comparison to what's being made off of you. But I do think that there's, it's just like anything, right? There's some good and bad with everything. The bad is what you're pointing out and how it might take away from some of the greatness that we see within sports because people aren't going to achieve that because they'll stop here instead of working to try to get here.
Here's my solution to it. And, it's not going to be the ultimate solution. I doubt people are even thinking about it. Maybe some people are. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, you went back and said, okay, we're not going to allow people to jump straight from high school to pro because there's some immaturity problems and things that are happening and we're not seeing the successes and all that. Multiple sports, obviously, football, basketball, everything else. So they went back and said, okay, we're going to create a rule of minimum time in college and all that. Age 18, I think, or I forgot what it is in football now. I want to say 3 years or whatever it is, or 2 years. And then, they're the minimum age in the NBA and all that.
Right.
Okay, that was one piece of the pie, but kids obviously weren't getting paid to go to college, the way they should have been, in NIL style. They're getting the scholarships, but that's it.
Right.
Then NIL comes along. NIL offers the door to get them marketed, get them their money, get them what they're doing in their college. Here's my solution. 3-year guarantees out of high school.
That's how you solve the problem. And I think we've talked about that before. Yep. I think with the NIL agreement, the colleges should also get some payback too. I shouldn't agree to pay you a lot of money, and then after you've had a year of making a lot of money, you're looking to see if you can make more money somewhere else.
Well, and you create the ultimate win-win in that situation. You restore what college is supposed to be, which is the student athlete doing their craft, getting paid for it, getting their compensation, and more importantly, learning about life, which I think is the fundamental thing that gets lost in college now because I don't call them student athletes anymore. That's just my personal take. I don't feel like these kids go to school. We've had that conversation about how someone's traveling from Rutgers to UCLA one weekend to play a game. It doesn't make sense. So if colleges want to play that game, then I think you put in a 3-year commitment, regardless of sport. That allows the player to develop. It allows the college to get their incentive and their, investment, if you will, in whatever they're giving. And more importantly, it brings back rivalries in the tradition of college sports. Because that doesn't exist today either. You can't tell me that anyone from half of these schools is going to go say, okay, this is a rivalry game for me. Next year, they're playing at some other school.
Yeah, true. I don't know if rivalries are born or more from the individual or the regional location. I feel like the rivalries were destroyed because they have USC going to Rutgers instead of USC playing UCLA in the Pac-10.
My bigger thing is that, okay, when a kid decides, let's say you have this 3-year rule coming into play. When a kid decides to go play for a school, he's going to go play for either A, the coach, or B, the school itself. Like that's his thing, local, whatever, whatever, or whoever's getting the most money, whatever it is. But that 3-year commitment also keeps him vested to say, okay, I want to grow myself, this program, whoever it is. And that's what I think will rekindle some of those rivalries and things that exist in the region.
That I agree with. That I do agree with. Like the longer that people stay, remember the old days when Duke played North Carolina and you had that star power because the kids were still there. The stack houses were there more than a year or whatever. You had, hopefully that was true. But you had all of these players that stayed for 2-3 years. So now that part I agree with. That's how that rivalry was born. Like I hated Chris Leitner. I wish he would have went to the pros after year 1. I had to watch him for too many years over at Duke. But that was how you got your love or your hate for someone, which built those rivalries.
Yep. Nope. I don't disagree. So no, I think that would help. There's got to be some rule changes within NIL that have hopefully kind of improve it or make it better. That's all my suggestion is at the end of the day.
I agree with that. It's just like any concept, right? You initially come out with that concept, you find the good and the bad in it, then you tinker with it. What are the lessons learned so that we can make this better? So I think the NIL is the right step. It's just that they need to do, I think what you said makes a lot of sense. Hey, you shouldn't be some kind of hired gun that every year you just go around like Deion Sanders did when he moved from Dallas to San Francisco, back to Dallas and all that. They should have a commitment just like you're making a commitment. Hey, you know what? I'm going to pay you $200,000 during that 3-year period, along with giving you the scholarship to take care of your college expenses. And in return, you're going to stay here for 3 years because I don't want to spend $200,000 and you go skip to another school next year because they're offering you $300,000.
Exactly. Nope. Like I said, and going back to this whole NCAA bit, we don't open up the trade deadline in the end, or we don't open up trading in our NFL or moving teams in the NFL in the middle of the Super Bowl or the middle of the playoffs, do we? So why are we doing that in the college tournament? Which doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
case in point, Scottie Pippen's son, I believe, plays for Michigan or something. He already signed up for the portal. He already signed up for the portal yesterday because it opened yesterday. He didn't declare where he's going, obviously, but he already signed up for the portal. So I'm like, kids playing this weekend.
Well, and quite frankly, if I'm the coach and I'm the players, how do you feel about that? If you see the guy that's standing next to you, supposed to be in the trenches with you, ready to go to war, is saying, as soon as we get done with this little battle, I'm going to war with somebody else.
Well, case in point, McNeese State. The news about Will Wade came out 2 days before they're supposed to step on the court for their first round matchup, and said, "Hey, he's already probably taking the NC State job or whatever." Still gets in there. Luckily, his kids still play for him first round.
I was going to say they still played for him.
Upset, did well and everything else. Second round comes around, they get spanked, whatever. Guy's already hightailing it over to NC State. He's already taken his team manager, who's gotten all the kudos in the world with him, and everything's moving on. I mean, it to me, that's ridiculous. Like, it just doesn't make sense.
I agree. Plus, you just crushed all of these kids. You gave them the biggest moment that they probably had in their life, or maybe not. I mean, maybe in high school they were stars and they
won a game.
Yeah,
and one game.
I mean, because how would you feel? And I know this happened to my brother, where the coach at the school that he was going to, he was playing ball, and then he left, and the coach didn't reach back to try to get him either. And that's just a shame, because now these kids are sort of floundering there. They came because of you. You hyped it up. You created a culture and an atmosphere, and then poof, it's gone.
Yep. See, when I played in high school and in relatively college, I played for the fact that the coach was there. I played for the fact that I, obviously one of the players that were around me, but I went there because the coach was going to be the next thing that's going to be helping my development.
Right.
And that's generally how I think most people like to think, but that has completely changed now, 100%.
Well, and honestly, let's be real. Every coach,
they got to look at themselves too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, as a player, I feel bad for those kids. As a person, I feel bad for those kids and what he built, and now he's gone. But the reality is, each coach is there, and they're only there for a period of time. There are a few that might stay for their, coaching and career. But many people are taking steps by, I did well at McNeese State. Now I'm getting offered this, which is twice as what I'm making in McNeese State. So I'm going to move there. So I'm not mad at coaches for doing that. We shouldn't tie them down. It's not that their lives are the commitment to the kids. But I do feel like there is a relationship that you build with your team. And, it's just like the best, your best friend deciding that they're just going to go move across country. And, you know how it works. We'll keep in touch. But you know how that works. The reality is you don't keep in touch because time and duties and distance keep you away from that. So I don't want to seem like, I'm telling coaches they can never leave, because that's not true. But I do feel for the kids for every program that is left in the wake of a great coach. Yep.
Now, that said, going back to the loyalty of the 16 teams that are still there.
Let's go take a look at this, baby. And we still got some powerhouses to play. So
let's jump right into the first foray. So you've got Michigan and Auburn. And we just talked about Michigan a little bit in the wrong way.
Well, now that you just said that, I feel like Michigan might not have the same spirit and fire that they would have if they didn't hear that one of their players was going through the portal.
Right. And, well, it's an interesting setup. So Auburn, they're coached by Bruce Pearl. Bruce Pearl used to be with Tennessee, used to be with a few other teams.
Yeah.
He's had his own successes along the way. Another guy that he's been loyal to where he was, but then, he's willing to take the next best position wherever that may be. I've respected him as a coach. Don't really respect him off the court just because of the way he's kind of carried around his teams and all that. But that said, he's got a hell of a team right now. He's got potentially the player of the year in Janai Broome. He's got the makings of a team that could win the title. However, I'm going Michigan on this one, and it's simply on the
special.
Yep, somewhat upset special. It's a 5-1, and you got to remember, this is the weird thing where Michigan took a lot of flack for their seeding because of the fact that they had beaten teams that are seeded above them in the Big Ten, and yet they won the Big Ten. That's the funny thing.
That's right. They won the Big Ten, not Michigan State, not Wisconsin.
Yeah, so this is a team that was catching fire late. They've got great depth. They've got a front court and a backcourt leader on that team. It's a tough-nosed team. I'm normally not a big Michigan basketball fan outside of the Fab Five way back in the day because I don't think they've ever had the coaching and the ability to win a title. But in this game against Auburn, I'm going Michigan.
I'm going just the opposite. I think Auburn had a lackluster performance against Creighton. I feel like they are going to start hitting their stride. I feel like they're going to beat. I just feel like Michigan, they don't have enough to keep it going from a defensive or an offensive standpoint, in my opinion. And I feel like at this particular game, and again, we're still in the South, so they got a home field advantage.
Yep.
I feel like Auburn has enough to outlast Michigan. I see them winning by double digits.
Fair enough. We'll see where that one goes. Bottom half of that bracket, which is where it gets interesting. Ole Miss
against Michigan State. Now that's a game, y'all.
Now Izzo's not magic all the time in the NCAA. We know this. He's always done that historically with plenty of teams, and he's always been able to get the best out of his players at this time of year. Somehow, it doesn't matter where this kid came from. Doesn't matter how this kid grew up. They play their best ball for him at this time of year. The man knows how to speak to his players and make it work.
Yep.
I think the same thing can be said, even though it's a smaller sample size, with Chris Beard. I've always respected the hell out of him as a basketball coach and a recruiter. Yes, he's had off-court issues, whatever. We know the history on that.
Right.
But I tell you what, he's got a hungry group of kids at Ole Miss, and I tell you what, they got this kid down there. Forget the name. The white boy. Yeah, Pagula
Pagula. There you go.
Yeah, that boy bad.
Yeah, what is that? That boy bad.
And
I'm bad.
I'm going Ole Miss over Michigan State on this one.
I can see that.
Yeah.
I would honestly, I can't. Actually, is his name Pagula? I was looking that up, and I'm not getting his name. Padula. There you go.
Yeah.
I like Mississippi. I and it's funny because my son was calling them Old Mississippi. I was like, no, it's called Ole Miss. But as good as I think they are, they actually have the kind of defense. They've got the tenacity. They've got a heart. Yeah, and they're hungry. But how do you go against Izzo? You know what I'm saying?
Like, this time of year. And believe me, I've eaten that millions of times, and maybe I'll eat it again. But
I just can't. I can't go against him. I have them going and playing against Auburn and then losing to Auburn in the Elite Eight. But you just can't go against him early. I just feel like you said he gets the most out of his players. He's got that experience. He knows how to balance the anxiousness of wanting to play with and temper that with some of the things you need to manage from an emotional standpoint during the game. I just feel like he has that edge. I'm going for Michigan State.
Yep. And frankly, as the overall bracket there, I think you said you had Auburn and Michigan State going against each other. I'm going with whoever wins this game, the Ole Miss and Michigan State game, to win it out of the bracket and make the Final Four. That's my pick.
I can see that. I can see that. You build a lot of momentum. If it's Ole Miss, you got to really start pumping your chest and feeling like you're invincible if you go through these first 3 games and beat Michigan State in your 3rd game. So I agree with you there.
Yep.
All right, the bottom bracket.
Florida, Maryland. So you got a battle-tested SEC team that frankly has impressed me with the size and the depth they got, and honestly, the kid that they got there, something Jr. I forget his name. Clayton Jr. Sorry, Walter Clayton Jr.
Yes.
That dude. He reminds me of like AI. Yeah, he reminds me of AI. He can carry that team and he can do that damage. And he's got bigs up front that can carry that team. As much as I like Maryland, and they're just too young in my opinion. They don't have enough depth on that squad outside of their starting 5 to keep up with Florida. So that's where I'm going Florida on that one.
I agree with you in every way. This Florida team reminds me of the old one that had
baby.
Had Noah on there, had Al Horford on there. They look like that team, and I think that they're going to go far in this tournament. Maryland, they were 3 steps away from losing that game, because if you watch that move,
hint.
he took about 3 steps before he actually shot the ball. So, Kudos to them.
Dairy Queen, whatever you want to call him. I am Baltimore. Yeah, he took a few steps there.
I tell you what, though, great soundbite. Like, what made you think you could do that?
You should hear the local press here. The mayor's eating it up. The governor's eating it up. Everybody's eating it up. that kid
his credit.
That kid deserves NIL for the next year if he wants to stick around.
For real. Plus, again, he's a rookie. So for a rookie to be able to have that kind of swagger and perform in that moment, kudos to them. But you're done after this game.
Exactly.
We got on the bottom half. So we got Texas Tech, and we got Arkansas. Kansas, because your Kansas. Wait, let me finish. Kansas was better than your Kansas.
It's better than my Kansas, that's for sure. I can go into whole tirade on my Kansas team, but we'll save that for way later. That's a whole different discussion.
They're not worth mentioning now.
Arkansas, I tell you what, Pitino's got these kids fired in. He's got them locked in. He's got players. He's got that team in my opinion right now. But this Texas Tech team's for real. I've watched them all season in the Big 12.
Calipari, right?
Oh, sorry, Calipari. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Calipari. Yeah, Calipari, yeah. He eats it. But anyway, I take Texas Tech here because this Texas Tech team it's for real. It's just like the team that came out in the Final Four way back about a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. They are hungry. They are well coached. They are deep. They are physical. They will outman Arkansas in that respect and have greater depth. That's the reason I'm taking them over Arkansas. And then when they play Florida, I'm calling for an all-out war. That's going to be a great game, in my opinion.
I think you're right about that, but I'm thinking it might not be the teams that you think. I'm going with Arkansas. I'm sorry. You know what? I should have gone with my gut and taken Arkansas against St. John's. I didn't do that. I got family down there. Power to the Moors down there. They look hungry. They got another one of those coaches who knows about this experience. Got them. Went there with UMass, and remember Marcus Camby. I feel like this is their time. This is where they come back with the Big Nasty. Remember when they had the Big Nasty on their team, and they were really good. I think Arkansas.
Richardson teams, my friend. That's a whole different.
That's right. I just feel like they know how to win, and they got that grit. I think they, to me, remind me of what Ole Miss represents. I feel like they just have that want and hunger, and I'm going to do what it takes to win. And I got Arkansas winning that game against Texas Tech.
All right, fair enough. So then you got Arkansas, Florida. How do you got there?
I'm sorry. Florida? I know this sounds like I was just taking chalk, but how do you go against Florida? Florida
they're playing.
I feel like Florida is the best team in the tournament right now.
Florida is probably my second. They're my second best team behind Duke, and I've got Duke as my favorite now.
Yeah, I was going to say you could however you want to look at that, but Duke, let's transition to Duke. Duke, Arizona, is that going to be a game?
Nope, I think Duke runs them out of the building.
I think 25 points.
Arizona is only about 4 or 5 deep. I've seen them play, obviously, against not just my Jayhawks, but just in general. They're a good team, but they don't have enough star power to take down Duke. There's no way. I think it's an easy pick.
Although I just want to comment on one thing we talked about. Arizona played Oregon, and neither one of them are in the Pac-10. That was just strange.
You got Bill Walton turning in his grave at some point.
Yeah. And Lou Olson and everybody else.
Yep. No, that was awkward to watch.
It just totally is. And quite frankly, I feel like Duke's going to smoke them. BYU, Bama. BYU is one of those teams that a lot of the people who are looking at this said could be the dark horse.
I watched BYU ever since they smoked my Jayhawks by 30 in Provo earlier this year. That team is the one team in the entire tournament that is epitomizing that word team. I have never seen a group of guys come together that well this season unless it was BYU. And I feel like that team really does play for each other in the fullest way possible, which is kind of cool to watch, especially in this NCAA setting. That said, that Bama team has got 3 players that are just studs, and they will overcome the fact that BYU can bomb you out of the building, mind you. This is a team that set the record in the Big 12 tournament with 17 threes in the first round.
So they can get at it.
They can bomb you out of the building. They got a couple guys up front that they're not necessarily scorers, but they can defend and block. So it's a good team. But you got to remember, Bama's got Sears. Bama's got LeBaron, or I forget how the kid's name is. He's a freshman that's bearing LeBaron something. And then you got the white boy. Yeah, and then you got the Phylon, that's his name. And then the white boy. The white boy, he epitomizes Southern basketball, let me tell you. He reminds me of a little Paul Wall flavor. He's got the stash, everything. So I'm going Bama. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't not go with Bama. Light-skinned brother. You know, playing point guard to me, I think he's just got it. He knows what to do with the ball. Yeah, it's just.
So then you got
feel like they know what they're doing. They got the kind of. Well, first off, they've been here before.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that matters. When you've been in a situation and you may have failed or you succeeded, you could take that experience. Next time you're there, it should help you. And I just feel like, honestly, I've got Bama beating Duke after they beat BYU. So that's what I feel about Bama. I've got them on this right here. Bama versus Duke, baby. I got Bama winning.
I got Duke to the title, so that's where we differ. But boy, would that be a hell of an upset, because you got it's gonna be a matchup of wits in that game. Because you got the three guys for Bama, like I just mentioned, like you just mentioned. Duke's got 5 or 6. So it's going to come down to depth and whether those 6 show up against the 3 or the 3 overcome of it. So that's going to be kind of a cool matchup.
Well, and that's what the beauty of sports is, that we could talk about these things. We could look at paper. We could throw stats all over the place. But it's about what you do when you're in between the lines. What you do when the bell sounds. Are you ready to go? And I think that you know, a lot of these teams, we talked about the Ole Miss, I talked about Arkansas. I feel like Bama's another one of those teams. And it's funny because all of those teams are those Southern teams. Bama, Arkansas, you know, Ole Miss. I just feel like they got that grit, like they ready to go out there and play in the dirt like I used to when I visit my cousins in Arkansas. We would play in the dirt. There'd be tree limbs and tree roots in the basketball court, but you learn how to play with them. You know, and I feel like they're that kind of player.
The last 4 seasons, I think we've given a lot of clout to the Big 12 and the fact that they've had such depth and such, you know, ability to get a lot of teams in the tournament. This year, the SEC got 14 teams in or whatever the hell it was, and they got 7 in the Sweet 16.
7 in the, can you believe that?
It's 7 in the Sweet 16. I think that in itself is the new bellwether and the standard. Now, more importantly, think about how much battle testing they had to do every single week throughout the season against each other, which is going to make them all the more tougher for this time of year. So yes, we're in for a southeast battle, if you will. And this might be the second coming of the SEC tournament this year.
We'll see what happens, but it's going to be some good basketball from here on out. Moving down to the last section where we got Houston against Purdue.
I think that's a no-brainer. I'm going Houston.
No chance for upset here?
No. I see Houston smoking them out of the building by 20.
I do too. I feel like that's the same with Duke and Arizona. It's like they're just outclassed. No chance.
This is Kelvin Sampson's best team for me. This is Phi Slamma Jamma reborn again. And it's a shame that it's going to be potentially either in your case, Bama versus Houston Final Four, or even or perhaps a Duke and Houston Final Four, because I feel like that could have been a great championship game, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I don't see this could be the first time since 2008 that all of the number 1 seeds make the Final Four. There's a really good possibility of that, given the landscape today and the talent that these 4 teams have. I see Houston smashing Purdue as well. Kentucky, Tennessee.
This is the best game of the weekend, in my opinion, because you had Kentucky's taken them out twice this year during the season, and this is a rivalry game to the fullest extent of the law. In fact, last week when Tennessee had to go play in Lexington for their first-round games, they were playing Rocky Top at Rupp Arena, which is blasphemous.
Wow. Ouch. There wasn't some scuffle or something, because that's not supposed to happen.
I mean, it was blasphemy at its finest point. You can only imagine the chip on the shoulder and the bulletin board material that I'm thinking that Mark Pope's going to use this weekend. And this battle, cool part is this one's taking place in Indianapolis, right up the road. This is going to be the best fan atmosphere, I think, of the whole weekend in Indianapolis. Well,
because you're going to have fans from both of those teams there, because it's not I'm skipping a jump for both of them.
Burnt orange and blue bleeding everywhere in Indianapolis this weekend. It's going to be phenomenal to watch that game.
Yeah.
It's hard for a team to beat a team 3 times in a season. We know this.
True.
I hate Rick Barnes with a passion, but I feel like the man is down to fail. You have to remember, Rick Barnes was at Texas at one point, had Kevin Durant, TJ Ford, and God knows how many other NBA stars
and still didn't win it all.
Still couldn't put the ring on. So to that point, yes, he's got a great team at Tennessee. He's got great players at Tennessee. Zakai Ziegler is a baller. I'm going Kentucky.
I figured you would go blue just because you're a Kansas guy. Honestly, Kentucky has always had a wealth of riches when it came to players, whether they had Calipari or Pitino or any other coach there. They always got the best of the McDonald recruits. And many times they had, teams that were so overloaded and they still didn't win. They underperformed for the talent that they had, and most of that talent ended up leaving like in droves within a year or two. So just for that, I've never really been a huge Kentucky fan, so I'm going Tennessee. But I also feel like Tennessee has the kind of squad. They're another one of those teams like Bama that I think can win it all. They have that kind of grit and moxie and
players. If the players can overcome what I call the Rick Barnes factor, then Tennessee will succeed. Absolutely.
Well, we'll see. And then if Tennessee wins, or whoever wins, so let's say Kentucky, Houston, who are you picking?
I'm going Houston in that entire bracket.
Okay, and I got Tennessee beating Kentucky, and on this sheet, I got Tennessee beating Houston. On my other sheet, I got Houston beating Tennessee.
Okay.
So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Okay, so granted, we're just talking this weekend. We could go into the Final Four afterwards. I know it's getting a little towards that time. So let's save our Final Four. Let's see who makes the Final Four, and then we can make our picks because they'll be done with the Final 8 this weekend, right?
Yeah. I mean, relatively speaking, I've almost got, I think, outside of my one upset up in the Southern bracket with Auburn and Michigan State and all that, I think you've got 2 1s and 2 2s in the Final Four.
On this sheet, yes, 2 1s and 2 2s.
I've got 3 1s and then the upset special with Ole Miss, basically. Yeah. So we'll see where it all goes. It's going to be
where it all lands.
It's going to be a very fun weekend.
I tell you what, I was happy with my picks. I mean, I did pick New Mexico over Marquette. I picked what's the name of that? I picked McNeese State.
Yep.
I got McNeese as well. So I'm very happy that I was able to pick those. I feel like there weren't as many upsets this year as you've seen in the past.
Well, and I think we'll talk about maybe that after the tournament is with NIL and everything else. I think we're going back to a world where it's going to be top heavy going into the second weekend. You're not going to see as many mid-majors or upset schools pushing through until the money gets balanced across the way.
I agree with that. And honestly, who's the lowest seed right now? Arkansas at 10?
Arkansas at 10. But can you even really consider it a low seed given the fact that, yes, it was, I think, a perennial top 25 school to start the season, actually.
Well, the problem with Arkansas was they lost their first 5 in-conference games. They were 0-5. The chances of them making, after that last loss, of them making the tournament were slim to none. And then they turned it around and went, like 11-6 or 15-6, whatever that thing was. Yep. And they played some ball. And they're another one of those teams that I feel is tested. I'd love to see, like Loyola did that year, I'd love to see Arkansas make the Final Four, even if it blows up my sheet.
Yep. No, I like seeing that 7-10 line historically has always been where you get these weird teams that'll make some sort of crazy run. Case in point, UConn, Khalid El-Amin. He was a 7 seed.
Yep. Well, I mean, you've had a lot of those. And honestly, as much as, for the staunchest college basketball fan, you still like Cinderella to be there a little bit. You like the Cinderella story, the small-time school who gets on the big-time stage, and now they can recruit for the next decade because somebody saw them win a few games in a tournament.
Despite everything that we've said about college sports, today, it's still the one sport where you have hope of an underdog walking through. Like it's seldom that we're seeing that in some of the other sports this day because there's so much star power and cachet that sits there. But in college, there's still that one place where you're going to see some underdogs break it, and you're going to be there for that moment to appreciate an underdog story.
Totally agree.
Yep.
I think with that, we're going to leave it to you guys. Enjoy the tournament. Enjoy the fun. As T.O. used to say, get your popcorn, baby.
Yeah, heck yeah. And not your jello.
That's my quarterback. Hey, send me these. Send me these. The one we did earlier too.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. On that note, we thank you all for listening, and we'll be back after this this fun weekend of the Sweet 16.
Hey, enjoy yourselves. Have some fun, and remember, be kind to each other.
Yes, sir. Enjoy it. Catch you guys later.
Thank you, partner. Peace out.